As advances in technology drive down the cost of DNA sequencing, it's becoming accessible not just to the sick, but the curious. And a handful of companies have arisen to meet the demand. They don't offer whole genome sequencing yet, more of an economy-class genome scan. One of the best known is the Silicon Valley startup 23andMe, co-founded by Anne Wojcicki.
From day one when we started this company, our goal has always been how do we make genetics accessible? And we started off with the genotyping technology because it's a fabulously robust technology, it's incredibly reliable, and most importantly, it's inexpensive.
Human genomes are 99.9% identical. But by analyzing the DNA in your saliva, 23andMe will show you 1 million sites in your genes where the spelling sometimes differs between people. These one-letter variants may predispose you to certain traits and diseases. 1 million letters may sound impressive, but that's far less than 1% of your DNA.
Genotyping is not DNA sequencing. Genotyping is identical to looking at 100 words in a 600-page novel and believing you know everything about Tolstoy.
Genotyping can explain odd traits, such as why some people find Brussels sprouts bitter. But when Jay Adelson wanted to know his chances of getting the brain disorder known as Parkinson's disease, he found the results far less clear.
There's something called an odds calculator, and that odds calculator says I have roughly a 60% chance of contracting Parkinson's disease. And my father has it, but his parents and his grandparents, no one had Parkinson's disease. So while it's a genetic trait that passes down, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to contract it. And so I spent a lot of time trying to understand what it meant.
Almost all the evidence we're going to get will be not hard, determining facts about our futures, but it'll be probabilistic information. It'll tilt the odds a little bit one way or another.
And we're not very well prepared as a society to sort of negotiate those risk elements. And some people will overinterpret those risks, and they will rush out and try to get diagnostic tests, or they'll try to get surveillance tests to try to help them interpret what this information means and what it doesn't mean.
Given such concerns, critics argue that genetic information should only come from a medical professional. Anne Wojcicki disagrees.
As of today, we're the only company that allows you to go direct to the website and not require you to go through a physician. And again, I think this is really core to our belief that your genetic information is something that's fundamentally about you, and that you should have the right to get access to that information.
Even the head of the National Institutes of Health, Francis Collins, decided to take the genomic plunge. He submitted his DNA to 3 genotyping companies, including 23andMe.
I was a little on the cynical side about, yeah, these are early days, and how do I know they even got the results right? But opening up that website and beginning to look down the list of things where I turned out to be at higher than average risk got my attention.
All 3 companies agreed Collins was at a substantially increased risk for getting type 2 diabetes.
And that got me motivated. I am 27 pounds lighter today than I was 2 years ago, and I'm working out 3 times a week. And the chance to have a little bit of a prediction about your future, as imperfect as it is right now, and it's very imperfect, could still be a teachable moment.
But some of the results were contradictory.
Prostate cancer was the most glaring example. One company said higher than average risk. One said about average. The other said lower than average risk.
So what's going on? According to neurogeneticist Rudy Tanzi, companies often look at different parts of genes and make predictions based on incomplete data.
These two are that one. Even when we have that full set of genes where these variants increase your risk and these variants protect you, knowing how they work together or independently to come up with a real number, good luck. And Remember, most of those variants are going to work together with your lifestyle. They're not guaranteeing anything. It depends on how you eat. Do you exercise?
I always think about, is it possible that the person who's told they're not at high risk will do less and maybe be harmed?
Oh, I don't have a cardiac problem genetically. Now I'm going to go out and eat rich foods night and day and so on. So there are all sorts of decisions that result from that. Information is always hard to handle.
One example is a piece of genetic information so potentially disturbing that even a founder of modern gene science refused to take a chance on running into it.
James Watson, the man who co-discovered the double helix of DNA, one of the very first people in the world to have his genome completely sequenced. He said to the scientists who were doing the sequencing, "There's one gene I don't wish to know anything about."
Known as APOE4 on chromosome 19, it has been associated with late-onset Alzheimer's, the leading cause of dementia in the elderly. The variant increases one's risk 3 to 10-fold.
But what does that mean? What does it mean to say you have a 10-fold increased risk over someone who doesn't have it? Can you then convert that into an absolute lifetime risk type of number to say, here's your % chance of getting the disease? No, because you need to know what other genes work with ApoE. You need to understand how lifestyle is working together with ApoE.
In fact, many people with APOE4 never get Alzheimer's, while others with the disease don't have the variant.
I think the real key here is to disabuse people of the misunderstanding that genetics is wholly deterministic. In a few rare instances, there is a tight linkage between a particular mutation and a disease. But the vast majority of genetic information is largely probabilistic.
Yet some genes speak louder than others. Although we get 2 copies of most genes, one from each parent, certain dominant genes confer a trait of their own.
I'm going to lunch with Katie, Mama.
And certain dominant disease genes, although rare, will eventually make you sick. As a volunteer for the Huntington's Disease Society, Katie Moser works with people in this rare category. Among them, Megan Sullivan. 4 years ago, Megan was a high school student with everything to look forward to. But with college came a set of heartbreaking symptoms.
Oh my goodness, sophomore with these. I had no idea why, because in high school. Since 5th grade, I made the honor roll every single time.
The reason for Megan's plummeting grades, sudden movements, and stumbling speech is a snippet of genetic code that repeats many times instead of a few, causing Huntington's disease. The mutation creates an elongated protein in the brain, which is as toxic to Megan as it was to Katie's grandfather, who also had Huntington's. And if he passed this gene to Katie's mother, Katie had a 50% chance of carrying it herself. For years, she wondered if she should get tested.
In the case of a gene mutation that guarantees the disease, that's a real tough decision because there's no hope. If you get the wrong answer, it's somewhat of a death sentence.
I decided to get tested for the gene because I wanted to be able to plan my life financially.